Hi, Sandy.
Amy, hello, good morning.
How are you today?
Good. We had clouds here, which isn't common, so it's always good to see blue sky back. How about you?
Lovely, lovely. We've got clouds now. They must have come from Colorado and now they're over us.
I think it's going to be when I look ahead, it's actually kind of a cloudy week, which isn't very typical. So I'll just take the sun while we have it. And we have my stepson and his girlfriend are visiting, so we've got visitors and
Oh,
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Very fun.
Mhm.
So, speaking of visitors, I had a visitor here in Kansas City this weekend. An old friend who we used to be parents of volleyball girls playing volleyball. So we used to travel around and do volleyball tournaments. She was in Kansas City, but she listens to our podcast. And I know, and she wanted to say hi, and we met for coffee, and she said sometimes when she's out walking, because I know most of the people I talk to, they listen to us while they're out walking or running or something, but she said she talks back to us. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's funny. She joins our
I,
conversation. I
she
wish.
joins our conversation. So hi,
Maybe
Tracy.
technology will go there. Hi, Tracy. Maybe technology will go there that we can loop people in live, right? Like LinkedIn Live, Podcast Live.
Right, right. And we could see, yeah, that would be kind of cool. Yeah. All right. So wanted to share that little tidbit because it was lovely
Hello,
catching up with
Tracy.
you. Yes. And then I have another funny story. So today we're going to talk about words. And I'm going to tell you this story and it will segue into words. Okay. So, but got a call last week and it was interesting because it was actually a call to my husband's number. And the call was I have information. They were looking for me and they had information for me. And that's all they said. And so I'm sharing this because the words were so vague that I'm like, I'm not calling this number back. This is really sounded very spammy, right?
Right.
Right. So they called again today and left a message or sent my husband a message, but they linked it to a news segment from North Carolina. This lady was from North Carolina. And I will share this with you. Our family has been being searched for by someone in North Carolina who bought some stuff at a garage sale, and it had my dad's stuff in there, his diploma, some of his Navy papers, and all this stuff.
How did it get there?
Well, my mom lived in North Carolina for a bit, so I don't know. She bought it at a garage sale. I don't know exactly how it got to the garage sale.
That's awesome. That's fun. That
I
connection.
know. So anyway, they found us, and I'll send you the link of the video because it's so funny because it's photos of my kids. It's photos. There were
Really?
photographs, and then there were photos of my
Probably
dad.
got left in a closet or something in the move, right? Or some
Right.
storage place that somebody forgot to look in. That actually sounds like something my mom would do, like to go to those lengths to get it back
Yeah.
to, one time, at St. Wenceslas, where our kids went to school, I bought a book at a book fair and it was a used library book. And in it was a little slip of paper that came from like grandparents to a granddaughter, and it was very sweet. And somebody had since passed away, but anyway, I found the now adult daughter and got her that note, and she was very grateful. So
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, the reason I wanted to tie this to words is the words that she used in the first phone call were so vague that I'm like, that just sounds like spam.
I was gonna say,
Whereas,
did you think it was spammy?
yeah, it was very spammy. I have information for her. She was looking, she said my name, and she said, I have some information for her. And that's all she said. And so it was kind of, well, that's weird, from North
He has a
Carolina.
friend locked up in Mexico and I need bail money.
Exactly, exactly. So the words that she could have used the first time, and no offense to her, but she could have said, we found some items we think belong to your family, and we wanted to be in touch with you. So that could have been just a little bit of a,
Right.
oh, all right, I'll check that out. So anyway, that's so we're talking about words. And yeah, one of the things that inspired this conversation was what's happening in the political world and how the words are being used to create emotions and to create this I don't know, what do you want to put to this?
They're used strategically to provoke emotion and get a reaction that they're looking for. And so what Amy and I talked about, of course, we don't want to talk about politics or bash someone or the other, but just the fact of how words can be used for manipulation or really to stir emotion. And sometimes, we know in life it's unintended and sometimes it is intended. And when we got to talking about this, Amy, it also got me to thinking as a writer how words do matter, but because of the number of times that I edit, I'll notice after reading aloud or reading it fresh a second time how to change a word. But when they come out of your mouth and you have to retract it or not retract it, defend it. Sometimes people maybe the wrong word came out and they should retract it or apologize or say, let me state it a different way. But I think too often people get defensive and almost make it worse because they want to defend their choice of words. Yeah. So spoken words especially matter because we don't always have the benefit of reflection before we say them.
Which, yes, I think that's spot on, because sometimes things just come out of our mouth and we don't think about the consequences of them, and they sometimes don't feel like they're going to hurt anybody. Did you watch that clip that I sent you about the gentleman who wrote the book American Fiction, but it wasn't American Fiction. Anyway, it's what American
James. It was a new book he had out. I think it's called James. And it was interesting, Amy. It was Jim from Huck Finn and his perspective as James, correct?
Yes. But he's also the one who wrote American Fiction.
Right.
And his whole thing was about this language that is expected of certain demographic of groups of people. And he talked about the N word, and he was talking about how if you walked in and called me and said, hey, N word, and actually said the word, or you said, hey, N word, and said N word, then depending on the intention, if the intention is the same for both of them, then it's the same.
Right.
If the intention is mean for both of them, then it's the same. They're the same word, which I thought that was really, I don't know. It was interesting just listening to him. He was very smart.
And I wrote down his quote, I don't care about the word, I care about the intention. And actually that goes back to the written word too, because sometimes you can read something in writing, especially if it's a text, if it's something very short, and pull out the wrong intention. Whereas if you hear the words spoken, even it doesn't matter what the words are, it's what the intention is. And I'll bring up a new subject, and that is Kate Middleton speaking on the video about her cancer. So when she gave that interview, there were words that came out, but you clearly could feel and interpret her intention, which is, this is devastating, and please let me take care of this with my family. Thank you for your support. There was nobody was looking for Photoshop or who wrote the speech, because her intention came out more so along with her words and supported her words, but the intention that came with them was probably more important. And the reaction was, people said, we're so sorry. It calmed everything down because her intention came across with the words.
Right. That's a good point. I think sometimes with spoken words, and hers was videotaped. Right. So people could watch it over and over. And I know many people did. They watched it the second, third time just to kind of soak in the news. And, but when we speak to some people, it's not recorded, so people can't ruminate on that. Sometimes it's just you say it we evoke feelings of some kind, and sometimes people even can't even tell you what you said exactly, but it evoked this feeling, and you've got to address whatever you whatever you said or did to create that feeling in somebody. And that's when getting defensive is hurtful,
Right.
or it's good just to, apologize if you offended somebody, because you just sometimes your words are taken out of context, or sometimes you meant it and you shouldn't have meant it.
No, I found an article, and I'll include this. It talks about the author. It's a New York Times, the book behind, and they talk about the author, which of course I'm not finding his name. Da, 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 da. Anyway, I'll include that in here. Oh, Percival Everett, was that his name? Percival Everett, and the novel was called Erasure.
Yes, yes, very good. Yeah, that
I
was
did
his.
find that. But when we started talking about this subject, Amy, I kept thinking of a quote that I've gone back to many times, and it's Maya Angelou, who says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
And us talking about words, and I was thinking of my own life examples, there's a reality in how you feel is usually the precursor to how you feel is sometimes, many times, words that are spoken. So you might not remember what was said or off or said. You're going to remember how you feel, but those feelings are many times provoked by the words. So
Yeah.
I can remember vividly when I first started dating my now ex-husband. I had met for the first time a family friend who became a lifelong family friend of ours. And if I were to have told her this story, I think she would be devastated, because she'd say, I didn't say that. And what I'll tell you is I'm going to tell you what happened. And in retrospect, I'm probably wrong on the words, but I know exactly how I felt. So the words probably have changed in my memory, but there were some, but she basically said, oh, we always thought Scott would date somebody who's cute and thinner. Okay. I'm sure that's not exactly what she said.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I
Sure, she didn't
remember
say that.
thinking, but she said words that were kind of a backhanded insult, that she was talking out loud, that basically she was telling me I wasn't what they expected him to date. They expected him to date maybe somebody who's more a cheerleader, but whatever those words were, what I heard was, we thought you'd be cuter, thinner, more popular. You aren't what we expected, in a negative way. And they made me feel bad. Right. And obviously, over all the years, I never brought it up again, but I'll never forget how those words made me feel. They weren't intended to her to be bad. I'm sure how I'm repeating them, she did not say it that way. But if you work your way back, I'll never forget that feeling of feeling inferior. Maybe I'm not cute enough for him, or the family doesn't like me because I'm inferior, right? That I'm not good enough, or I wasn't what they expected. And I think back to words matter and words that come out. We don't always intend to make people feel bad, but sometimes it's better just not to say anything. Like maybe in that sense, even though she was talking out loud, keep it in your head, right? Nobody
Right.
needs an assessment of who, when you're that person, of what they expected, right?
Right.
And that's always been a good uh, comment for me to go back on when I do meet somebody, is get to know them myself and don't share with them first reactions, right? Because really, what good comes out of that? Because words matter.
Right. Words do matter. So I am like you. When something evokes deep feelings, I hang on to it. I hear those words, they stick with me. Is one of your love languages words?
Yes,
Yeah, mine is too. So I don't know if
that's my
that's,
top, is words of affirmation. So maybe it
that's
sticks even more, because Garrett doesn't remember words at all,
see,
like
I'm
at all.
it's my top one too. And I've always wondered. So Garrett's a good example of not remembering the words. That's good. I was wondering if it was just us who have words as the top love language, or it applies to everybody. So those words stick with us when somebody says something mean. Have you ever said something mean that has stuck with you that you're like, I shouldn't have said that? I've got those
Absolutely.
going through my head right now.
Now that I'm talking about being younger, I remember purposefully doing things probably out of jealousy, out of we want to get this person back, and being mean intention to the point where it didn't come off as that, but it was. I remember writing a column in our journalism write up in the newspaper, and I talked about somebody's rat nest hair, and it was the prettiest girl in our class, but I didn't call her by name, but it was just mean, right? And it was out of jealousy, honestly. It was out of jealousy. Nice girl, and I remember doing that, and I don't think she'd remember it. Maybe she would, back to my point too, or she might not have even thought it was her. But I think we should all get dispensation from when we were teenagers. I remember getting called out on things in my career where I thought I was trying to get a project over the line, but I've talked about this before. I've said words of dismissiveness, and I remember them because I was called out on them and learned that my words mattered and changed what I did. And what I'll add to that is I am so grateful that I was called out, because I can't imagine, Amy, how many times I have said bad things that I've absolutely no idea that I did it because nobody called me out on it. So it's good to call people out on their words in a kind way, because if it wasn't meant out of malice, you've got to let them know. Otherwise, how do we improve? Or how can we be aware that we've said something that was bad? And we all say things that are bad, but it's okay to call people out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of us are just more, I want to say programmed, or just to be a little bit more dramatic. And in the drama, sometimes we pick more dramatic words, which are create these feelings of emotions, good and bad. And if you tend to be looking at something negative, then you're gonna be dramatic and use these negative words. And I keep thinking, and I'm going to go to politics here just for a second, is when I am watching Trump, I'm just going to say his name because he's the one who evokes these
Not
emotions.
Voldemort. You can say Trump. I'm
I'm
reading
just,
Harry
yeah,
Potter right now, so we don't have to say, do not say his name.
yeah. So, yeah. But he evokes these emotions in me that just like, it gives me stress. I almost just have to look away when he's being covered for, calling people vermin or whatever the words he's using that are trying to stoke the fires. It just upsets me. And to the point where I'm just like, I can't watch him. I can't listen to him.
And Amy, this has nothing to do with policy or really politics. This has to do with people. So what I'd say
Right.
is what bothers me the most is when I hear when people agree, I'm like, then they get stoked on it. How can such negativity and meanness stoke a person to say? It reminds me of a stoning. Have you ever read The Lottery, where everybody threw a rock at the person? And I can't wrap my brain around having a positive energy be evoked from that, a charge like I want to be a part of it, because all I understand is wanting to turn the TV off like you. I don't see how any good comes out of words like she's fat as a has been and should quit because they're dumb and terrible. I mean, in what world of raising our kids or being human beings are we going to do a podcast on how to knock people down in a way that they don't even know how to respond? But I guess the
Yeah.
words matter. I don't understand the encouragement either.
Right. Yes, the reinforcement
The
of
reinforcement.
that.
That's the,
Yes, because people are clapping and cheering. And so it
yeah.
like keeps it going. And anyway, yes. Okay. So to move off of politics and people, and then not politics, like you said, but it's unfortunate the words that are being used right now and how many people are being victimized by words out there. But one of the things I was looking at, and I remember this when I had kids, one of my kids' teachers gave this to me, but it was talking about how we describe our children.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, this applies to everybody, not just children. And so, but it's stuck with me because so many times we think we're just describing our child, but we're using harsh words, mean words that are like mean labels. So I have some examples here. So if you said, oh, she's a wild child, you know, instead that has a negative connotation to it. And you could just say, oh, she's very energetic, which feels more positive, right? So it's just this whole list. She's so emotional. She's caring. She's
Drama
very
queen.
shy.
She's such a drama queen.
Yes. Dramatic is more expressive. That's one of the words right here. A dramatic, expressive. So she's very expressive. Could go for drama queen, but it's these words that we've used to label children that puts this negative feeling to them.
That's a great point. Because how easy, it's like small talk, right? How easy is it to make these comments? And I remember doing that in meeting a new mom at the park or sitting in the bleachers, and you're just doing small talk. And what always comes up? Your kids. How old are
Mhm.
your kids? In what order? Oh, do you have girls and boys? Think about how those chain of questions happen. And then how easy it is to say, and I remember distinctly saying, oh, Zach, he's the responsible one. Safety first, Zach. You know, I would have these things that would come out of my mouth. Oh, Ben, oh my gosh, that kid, you know, he's the wild child. Oh my gosh, you know, and then there's Grant, he's the baby. Boy, is he ever the baby. I carried him till he was 4. You know, I had the whole chain of
Yeah.
comments, and I don't think any of them were really very flattering, were they?
No, but I think we do that to our kids. And that's why this list, I remember when I got it really stuck with me because it's just our natural tendency to say, oh, she's very shy, she's dreamy, and there's one here that I label a lot of parents and adults as impatient. They're so impatient. And the word to substitute is passionate. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if that really applies, but that's close.
And I do think part of it as parents is sometimes we feel this bit of ownership of our kids, and we're doing this, what we can do with ourselves, kind of poo-poo and, you know, oh, maybe I don't want to say my kids are so great, but you know, I'm going to not brag about my assets. I'm going to be more dismissive, but they're separate from us, right? And they have their own identities. And I'm going to flip this conversation a little bit more to grandparents. And I would tell you, back to words and words matter. My grandparents, and I was very involved with both sets of my grandparents. They both lived in town where I grew up, and all of them reinforced in me confidence, and it came from their words. And I so clearly can remember my grandfather telling me, after looking at maybe you read looking at my report card, reading a story that I had written. You're a great writer. I remember him telling me, you're going to be something someday. You're going to be somebody really important someday. And it was authentic. And they were never, it wasn't a let's boost her up because that's what we're here to do. You're the best thing in the world. But they chose their words wisely. They weren't told to me all the time, but when they did, it's almost like, you know, my grandfather, my other grandfather, when they did choose their words, they were positive and they were authentic. And he didn't say you're going to be the president. He didn't say you're going to be the first women's CEO, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be something someday. And that was for me to devise, right? What is
Yeah.
something? It could be happy. It could be successful. He didn't define what I needed to be or what that was. And I've shared that with other people that are grandparents, as advice to say the authentic compliments and using those words that you used, right? Spirit, boy, your spirit is going to do a lot for you because people can connect. You're a cheerleader and you bring people on, using all those examples you gave.
Yeah.
Yes, do that as parents, but there's a lot of listeners on here that are grandparents as well. They don't need to be compared to the other kids either. My grandkid is the highest in his class on the select team, but highlight what you're seeing in them, those positive words, because they will stick with them even more so than parents. I think there's something about the influence of a grandparent.
You know what? I did not have grandparents that were that influential. I don't remember words. I remember feeling safe with them, and they both, well, I will say my grandfather was around longer, and I do remember him being jolly and happy. And so there were probably some positive things, but I do have an aunt who has said things to me that just make me feel so valued, and it's so very authentic. And I always enjoy spending time with her just because she sees the good in me. And I think that's what I feel is when I'm with her, she sees the good in me. And it's like, oh, I so appreciate that. And if we can do that for everybody, our children, our grandchildren, and I think it's probably easier for grandchildren because you don't see all the naughtiness they do all
Right.
day. So for parents, it's hard because they're naughty, and I say naughty. What's a different word for naughty? Is there a positive word?
High spirited.
High spirited, yes, but they're testing all the time, and the parents are the ones that are being tested a lot. So there's that frustration, but grandparents don't get that all the time, and so they get to focus on the positive side of it.
You brought up a word that's near and dear to my heart, and that is valued. And being valued is a core human need. And words are a part of that because many times words will spur the feelings and the embracing of how your value is perceived by others and embraced by others, right? And then the feelings come off of that. But words matter in how you share your valuing of other people. Back to
Right.
my point on being dismissive, that's not being valued. Maybe I wasn't a bully and I said nothing mean, but using words that are dismissive do not spur a person feeling valued, right?
Right. Exactly. So I was listening to something today and it was talking about people going through a divorce. And one of the things that this guy said, he was like, don't talk bad about your partner when you're going through a divorce, which we've all heard this, so don't use these words that are make your partner look bad. And this is what he said next that caught my attention. He said, your child is half you and half them. And so when you're talking about them with negative words, that's also your child is taking that personally and feels like you're talking about them, the child. And I was like, boy, I had never heard that before. And that was a very eye-opening because I think about sometimes I make comments about Tom to my kids and we're still married. So it's not like but there's this like, oh, your dad, da 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 da, whatever. And I'm like, oh gosh, if that, it feels like an attack to them, I feel really like, okay, I need to stop doing that.
That's a great point. And back to being half of them, there's no good that comes out of throwing the ex-spouse, the other person under the bus or using negative words. And people do that and say these words because they think it makes them feel better, but does it ever really make them feel better? It can't, can it? I wouldn't
No,
think
and
so.
I think I also think it's a bit of a way to justify what you're doing is if you're saying, okay, this person's bad or this person's acting like this, so that's why I'm doing all this. So it can help justify your actions if you talk bad about other people. So but it's not good. I always think that people, when I do that, it's typically me trying to make myself look better than that person when I'm
And
pointing out
then
what they're doing bad.
in a bad, there's different relationships, friendships, in the
Yeah.
circle of friends, that person, and maybe they have done some things. And I always have to remind myself, is it even worthy? Don't bring it up, unless it's something that is calling to them, like back to our point of calling them out, then it goes directly to them. If the conversation goes that way and they're not in the room, walk away from it. Easier said than done though, because the moment somebody brings it up, the words start going. But I got to tell you, when if I reroute the conversation other ways or don't say anything, which I've done a lot after my divorce with my ex-husband, is just bite my tongue. Do not say anything because the temptation is there, right? I feel
Yeah.
so much better about myself when I'm done saying, yay, Sandy, that was not easy. And that's okay. You can do those things in private because those words didn't matter. And it's not even healthy for me to think them. But I felt better and energized by not saying things and giving myself my little pat on the back for doing something that nobody else will give me a pat on the back for, even though the kids have brought up over the years here and there saying, I'm so glad you're not like somebody else's parents who are divorced, because they will witness a different divorced couple, because my ex-husband, according to my kids, he's just as good as me, and we're both positive and we don't throw the other one under the bus. But when they see it from other people, they're like, holy crap, that's awful. And so then we get recognized.
Good. Good for you. Pat
That
yourself on the back
recognition
for that.
feels good too. Oh.
So I always tell my kids, because a lot of times my children will say something, their words are mean. They like poke these mean words, but they're trying to be funny. And I'm like, all right, being mean is not funny. And the thing, and I know we need to wrap up really quick, but I'm just going to say the one thing that sticks with me that I recently did is one of my friends was telling a story about how her and her husband met and they were drinking and she was drunk. And and I said, oh, you had your beer goggles on. And I was like, and then I like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that.
That way you, oops.
Oops, I know. So that has stuck with me. I feel bad
Did
about
she
it.
look at you horrified or did she just die laughing?
She just giggled and everybody just kept going, but he was sitting right there. And I was like, I feel really bad I said that. So anyway, all right, that's it for today.
Because words matter and we need to wrap these words up.
Yes, we do. All right. Thanks, Sandy. Have a good day.
Amy, see you next week. Bye.
Bye.